The webinar started now.
A very good morning to one and all present here. I, Hashita of the School of Law, in collaboration with the Rotaract Club and the Legal Aid Society, welcome you all to celebrate the Senior Citizens Week through this panel discussion on digital equity for the elderly, access, inclusion, and protection. On 14 December 1990, the United Nations General Assembly designated 1st October as the International Day for the Elderly. The celebration of International Day of Elder Citizens is done to create awareness and empathy regarding the well-being of the elderly. Every aspect of our lives today is impacted by the COVID pandemic. This pandemic has evidently brought the relevance of connectivity to the forefront, for we learned that the connectivity is inevitable to survive in the modern world. It is for the simple reason that the absence of it would imply absence from the rest of the world. On this note, I'd like to welcome our guest speaker, Ms. Hashita Mishra, Dr. Archana Sharma, Head of School of Law, the North Cap University, special guests, faculty members, and a warm welcome to all our viewers. Now, I'll request Dr. Tavleen Kaur Khurana, Faculty Coordinator, School of Law, to take over for the introduction of the event. Over to you, ma'am.
So sorry. Okay. To forget the elderly is to ignore the wisdom of the years. On 14 December 1990, the United Nations General Assembly designated 1st October as the International Day of Older Persons. This day is celebrated so as to sensitize the society towards the cause of the elderly and to ensure a humane attitude towards them. It becomes even more significant in the current chaotic times of COVID-19 pandemic. There is a dire need to understand the struggles and challenges encountered by the older cohorts. It is imperative that innovative steps be taken to raise awareness in the society for their special needs. To further the cause of the elderly, we at NCU, the School of Law, have decided to commemorate the International Day of Older Persons by celebrating 29 September to 6 October 2021 as the Senior Citizens Week. This will help us in providing the insights so as to mitigate the struggles of the elderly. A series of events have been planned by the School of Law for the Senior Citizens Week. We have some outreach activities by the Rotaract Club and the Legal Aid Society on 4th and 5th of October. We also have a workshop on the theme Digital Equity for the Elderly, Access, Inclusion and Protection, which is on 30th September and 1st October 2021. To deliberate on this topic, we have a first speaker before us, Ms. Hashita Mishra. Ms. Hashita Mishra has done her BA Honours Economics from Shri Ram College of Commerce and LLB from Campus Law Center, Delhi University. She completed LLM from Indian Law Institute, Delhi. And in March 2015, she was awarded 2 gold medals for being the overall topper and for securing the highest marks in the criminal law. She has also received UGC JRF certificates twice. Thereafter, she joined Jharkhand Judicial Service in July 2015, where she worked for a brief period of 4 months. After this, she joined Delhi Judicial Service in December 2015. Before being appointed as Secretary DLSA East, she has presided over Civil Court in Tis Hazari Courts and Mahila Court in Karkarduma Court Complex. She has also held Digital Negotiable Instrument Code. Ma'am, on behalf of the School of Law, the North Cap University, I welcome you to the event. We look forward to an enlightening session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Tavleen. I hope my voice is audible and there's no break in the voice.
Ma'am, we can hear you perfectly.
Thank you so much, Tavleen, for this introduction. At the very outset, I would like to extend my salutations to all the participants for today's session. We already have a brief background as to what we'll be talking about. So at this stage, I would also like to express my sincere appreciation for the School of Law, North Cap University, for coming up with this idea of organizing a series of events as we celebrate the International Day for Older Persons. So the webinar, the virtual symposium sort of a thing that has been organized by this university is probably the need of the hour, because the concerns of the geriatric population are very crucial and are very important. And these have gained more traction as the world reels under the shadow of this pandemic. Right. So we all know for the past 18 months, the world has been reeling under the debilitating and devastating shadow of the COVID-19 pandemic. Although this pandemic has spared none, like even the youngsters are equally vulnerable to the onslaught of this pandemic. But we all know that the maximum brunt of this pandemic has been borne by the senior citizens, by the elderly people, right? Because they are immunocompromised, they are weak, and probably they do not have as much resilience in fighting the virus. So their concerns have become the one of the most important issues to be tackled in this COVID-ridden world. So with this in mind, I have chosen the topic of digital, like the need to build a digital ecosystem, equitable ecosystem during the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. Because during this pandemic, it was realized that the miseries and the problems of the senior citizens were further exacerbated on account of the digital inequities, right? What happened during the pandemic was that the senior citizens were forced to shutter down and remain hunkered down in their residential spaces. They were not supposed to step out. Government issued several advisories asking the senior citizens not to step out of their house, because they believed that if they ventured out, there was a great likelihood of their contracting the virus. So many of the most essential services, which had hitherto been very crucial for the lives of these senior citizens, became inaccessible for them, right? And since they were not techno savvy, they were not digitally literate, they had to face undue hardship. So it's very important that we develop a equitable digital ecosystem, so that these services, which are very crucial for a comfortable lifestyle, for a comfortable life, are not denied to these senior citizens, right? When they are in their twilight of their life, these facilities should not be denied to them. So I'll be talking about the importance of digital inclusivity and digital accessibility during the course of my presentation, right? As Oshi ma'am has already pointed out, that 1st October came to be recognized as the International Day for Older Persons. Now, why was this day recognized as a day for older persons? Basically, all international days are observed as advocacy tools. Basically, there are so many issues which have hitherto been ignored, which have not gotten the necessary attention that they deserve. There are several issues which plague the vulnerable groups. So to bring their cause and plight to the center stage and to have a conscious deliberation on their issues, these international days are observed and celebrated. Similarly, for this reason, in the year 1990, the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution 45 of 106 to address the needs and concerns of the geriatric population, right? So one may think that why in 1990 all of a sudden this day came to be observed as International Day of Older Persons. So let me tell you here that it was not just a sudden realization that had dawned upon the international organizations and the countries to celebrate this day for older persons. This was a result of several other deliberations which preceded the 1990 resolution. For example, in 1982, the United Nations and other organizations had organized this World Assembly on Aging in 1982, and which led to the adoption of the Vienna International Action Plan on Aging. Thereafter, there was further incremental recognition of the geriatric concerns and needs, which further led to the adoption of the United Nations Principles on Older Persons in the year 1991. Thereafter, we had like another World Assembly on Aging in the year 2002, which led to the Madrid International Action Plan on Aging. So we see that there have been a series of international deliberations, confabulations, and resolutions which have been passed to cater to the geriatric needs and concerns. The 1990 deliberation in 1990 was just a part of the series of deliberations that have been taking place to recognize the rights of the senior citizens, right? So this was the background which led to the International Day of Older Persons being celebrated on 1st October. Now, some of you may be wondering as to why all of a sudden renewed focus is being given on the geriatric issues. So there are multiple reasons why geriatric concerns acquired the center stage of late, right? One reason is that there was evolving empirical data to suggest that the geriatric population would come to become would come to corner a very huge chunk of the demography, the world demography and the national demography in India, right? As per some data which has been compiled and collated, the geriatric population by 2019 was expected to exceed the population of children within the age bracket of 0 to 5 years. So this is a huge number of people that we're talking about. If we do not address their concerns, then we are probably leaving behind a very large portion of our population, and that would definitely have very negative ramifications for the country and the world. So we could not have sidelined their concerns. Another data shows that during the period of 2019 to 2050, right, these 3 decades, the largest increase in the geriatric population would come to be seen in the East Asian and Southeast Asian countries. India being a part of these nations cannot leave the issues of the geriatric population unaddressed, right? Similarly, the sub-Saharan African countries or the North African countries and Western Asian countries can also not relegate the issues of the geriatric population, because the fastest increase in the geriatric population would come to be seen there. As per one estimate, their current geriatric population is around 29 million, which is supposed to increase till to 96 million during these 3 decades. So we see that a significant increase in the geriatric population would take place. This is probably on account of the increasing life expectancy. The life expectancy in these developed, underdeveloped, and less developed countries is much more than what we see in the Western countries, where the life expectancy is already pretty high. So because of the increasing life expectancy and the declining fertility rate, it is the older population who will constitute a large part of the demography. So it was realized that we have to focus on the issues plaguing them, right? There are a host of issues which plague them, and digital inequity was one serious issue which was confronted by the older people. So in this world where internet has become ubiquitous, where technology is all pervading, and where technology is considered to be the life and soul of the population, you could not have denied this access to the geriatric population, right? Another reason why geriatric issues have again gained traction of late is that there has been a gradual but significant perceptual change of the society towards the older population, towards the elderly, right? Like earlier, probably the senior citizens, the elderly, were considered to be spent bullet. Like they were probably, their issues were relegated to the back seat because they were thought to be spent bullet. They had nothing significant to contribute. However, with evolving discussions, with the series of deliberations, it was realized that no, that perception itself is misconceived. It's a wrong perception that people had. The elderly people are in fact a treasure trove of experience and wisdom. They are a repository of wisdom for the world. We learn so much from them. They are the people who can guide us to follow the rightful path, to learn from their mistakes and build a society which can avoid the mistakes that they had committed. So again, the world agencies thought that it's very important that we give them due recognition, bring them into the mainstream, ask them for their inputs, ask them what their problems are, and then do a brainstorming as to how to resolve their issues. Right. So for this reason, again, international days become very important. This year, the celebration of the International Day for Older Persons becomes all the more important because the pandemic, which has barreled through the world, has like disproportionately ravaged the lives of the senior citizens. Although it has imperiled the lives of youngsters also, it is very often said that it has caused great hardships to the youngsters, to the disabled, to the women, to the minorities, everyone. But one cannot deny this ineluctable truth that the disproportionate brunt of this pandemic, as I said earlier, has been borne by the senior citizens. So many things like the senior citizens, when confined to their residential spaces, were forced to like give up on their normal lifestyle. They were probably denied access to healthcare services. They were like, their ties with their family members came to be snapped all of a sudden because they could not visit their children, they could not visit their extended families. That had a very grave psychological impact on them because in the twilight of their life, the senior citizens want proximity to the near and dear ones. They want accessibility to the near and dear ones. But sadly, the pandemic changed it all for them. Like in a day's time, the world went topsy-turvy for our senior citizens. So, and then like even though they wanted to be near their loved ones, even though they wanted to access their doctors or to make purchases, the basic purchases, the grocery purchases, etc., they did not have the means because they could not step out physically, and they did not have the technical wherewithal to actually access these things online. So their miseries came to be compounded. Now, that's why it's very important that we give them the necessary tools to live their life in this technological world, right? Without digital literacy, without digital access, they cannot have a meaningful life. They cannot lead a happy and healthy life because so many amenities, so many things would be denied to them. So it's very important we address these issues which are plaguing the geriatric population, right? So it is in this backdrop that United Nations, like considering the special constraints, the special problems confronting the older people, the United Nations thought of having this theme, the theme of digital equity for all ages, digital access for all ages, as the theme for this year's celebration, right? So the main purpose is basically to realize the importance of digital access in the lives of geriatric population, to sensitize and spread awareness about the issues such as digital inaccessibility, digital inequity, etc., and to break the stereotypes, break the misconceived perceptions that people have towards the geriatric population. Very often it is seen that the younger population, they consider themselves to be digital natives. They think that they were born into the digital era, so they have the sole and exclusive rights towards digital technology, and they think that the senior citizens are bound to remain technologically handicapped. They are not supposed to acquire the necessary digital skills. Many of the youngsters have this misconceived perception that even if the elder people are taught to use the technological means, they'll not be in a position to use that well. However, these stereotypical notions needs to be shattered at the very outset. So this International Day, in a way, is being used as a tool to shatter these stereotypes, to spread awareness about that, and to also discuss upon issues such as accessibility, affordability, connectivity issues, capacity building of elders to use these digital tools. Thereafter, to also discuss like the participatory designing, like for applications, etc., so that the older population are also able to use the digital appliances, to use the digital links, etc. So this international day, it is hope that like we are having one lecture to discuss these issues. Similarly, a series of other lectures, deliberations, confabulations would be going on worldwide. There'll be intense brainstorming on these issues, and it is hoped that all civil like society organizations, think tanks, and other international and national agencies rise to the occasion and come up with innovative measures to address these issues, to make the digital technology accessible and affordable to the senior citizens, make the senior citizens technologically savvy, make them technologically literate, right? So it is sincerely hoped that this day, like after this day, this would not just remain a symbolic celebration of the cause of the geriatric population, but we as international citizens or as national citizens, we would also walk the talk, and the government would seriously think about ways and means to cater to the needs of the older population, right? So one good way to do that is for the countries to follow the roadmap laid down by the United Nations. Like last year, the United Nations laid down a roadmap for digital inclusion, inclusivity, and digital access. So probably that's a good starting point. India could probably take a leaf out of that roadmap and start taking proactive measures to make digital technology accessible to the senior citizens, right? So these are some of the things. Like I would also here discuss some of the ways in which probably India could take steps to address this digital inequity, this problem which is plaguing the older population, right? So before I do that, it's very important to understand as to what are the barriers which face the geriatric population, the older population, because you cannot arrive at a solution before you recognize and acknowledge the problems that plague the senior citizens, right? Any solution first needs the recognition of the problem. So there are multiple barriers which lead to digital inequity for the senior citizens. One such barrier could be cultural barrier, it could be social barrier, it could be economic barriers. It could be like physical barriers and mental barriers. So we need to recognize these multitude of barriers before evolving strategies to counter these, right? So one such barrier, as I've already spoken, is lack of digital access. We all know that many of the senior citizens in our country do not have access to technological devices, to digital devices. Like digital devices can come in many forms. Like it's not just computers, tablets, or smartphones that we're talking about. It could also be electronic appliances. It could also be about assistive machines and devices which are used by the senior citizens to lead a good quality of life. For example, we have these hearing machines. These are also a manifestation of digital technology, right? But many times the senior citizens do not have the like necessary knowledge as to how to use these assistive devices. So we need to train them as to how to use them. We also need to make these assistive devices accessible to the senior citizens. Now, accessibility is something which can be on account of lack of knowledge about these devices, or it could also be on account of these technologies or devices being very expensive. The prohibitive pricing of these technologies could be a very significant barrier towards digital access. So how do we address that? Right, that's something very important, and we need to ponder over ways as to how to make digital technology accessible to the senior citizens. One good way which many of the Western countries have done is that they have started providing financial subsidies to the senior citizens to purchase these digital devices. They have also started like giving subsidies to the senior citizens to subscribe to internet. Like they probably give a monthly subsidy to senior citizens to buy certain data packs, because data like internet data is considered to be very important for a good lifestyle. So many of the developed countries which have the necessary financial wherewithal, they have started giving financial subsidies to the senior citizens. We could also think of evolving such strategies and providing subsidies to senior citizens to purchase or subscribe to these things. Other than that, we could also probably like expect the corporates or the government departments to probably like pool in their resources and then distribute digital devices to the senior citizens, to the vulnerable groups. As you all know that many of the companies, like every 3 or 4 years, they upgrade their technology. Their computers that they had purchased are now outdated. They do away with those computers and they purchase new ones. Similarly for other technological devices. So what happens to these devices? So these companies can probably expected to pull in these outdated computers, refurbish them, get them repaired, and then like instead of discarding them, give it to the communities in need. Probably we could give it to an old age home or to senior citizens who are needed. So this would in a way reduce the e-waste also, and like cater to the needs of the vulnerable group. This is one way we could do it. Other than that, like since one person or one organization cannot have a solution to the problems of digital inaccessibility, probably we could also have like develop coalitions like the digital equity coalitions, which could comprise of different companies, different NGOs and think tanks, to cater to the needs of the senior citizens, who could like probably suggest measures like having computers in libraries for senior citizens, or having computers in other public spaces, so that senior citizens have ready and affordable access to these digital means. So these are some of the ways that we can think of making digital technology accessible to senior citizens. Now, we could also set up special kiosks for the senior citizens where they could probably move applications, online applications, or apply for Aadhaar card, or maybe for enroll for the COVID vaccination. We could have these kiosks. So in this kiosk, we would have a computer setup, which would make things easier for the senior citizens. They do not need to run around here and there. They'll have a resource person who will guide them, navigate through the digital world, and they'll help them apply for these things online. So this in a way would address the issue of digital inaccessibility. Other than that, the other issue which confronts the senior citizens is lack of digital literacy. So to address that, again, we need to come up with creative ideas. What can probably be done is that we can start organizing workshops for digital training of senior citizens, where they could be taught the basics of computers, how to open a Gmail account or an account online, how to open an account on a social media platform, how to receive friend requests, how to download things, etc., how to remain safe in the cyber world. So these are some of the sessions that can be taken for the senior citizens so that they can easily navigate their way through the digital world. The private companies, government departments, etc., can be brought on board for these sessions. The NIC could probably organize such sessions, or companies such as NIIT or Infosys, Wipro, etc. They could organize such sessions for senior citizens in collaboration with agencies which are specialized in addressing the issues of the geriatric population. Probably like there could be a tie-up between Help It India and Wipro to have these digital literacy classes. So this would be a good starting point. Many of the Western countries are relying on the private companies to cater to the digital needs of the senior citizens. Like if you just Google, San Francisco has a very developed digital equity plan. So there they have taken on board several private companies for this purpose, and they have this manual for digital literacy where everything, right from how to book an Ola cab, Uber cab, etc., they have compiled a list of things, how to make Paytm payments, etc. They have this detailed manual. So, and the private companies have contributed their bit in compilation of the same. And this is being used greatly by the senior citizens there. So we could also develop such teaching modules for our senior citizens, right? And other than that, what can also be done is that many a times the senior citizens, because they come from the generation for whom public libraries were a very important meeting point, or a point where they could improvise on their intellect. So we could also have certain online sessions for them in these libraries. We could have e-learning sessions for them in these libraries, where we could have a computer tutor who could help them learn the basics of computers. So these are some of the ways and venues where digital literacy can be promoted, right? Another barrier which confronts the geriatric population and makes digital technology inaccessible to them is the concept of ageism, the stereotypes that surround the senior citizens, right? Many a times senior citizens are always told that they are technophobic. Since they are not born in the digital era, they'll never be able to learn the necessary digital skills. As a result, they suffer, right? And then these stereotypes become ingrained in them as well. They come to imbibe these stereotypes. They come to perceive themselves negatively. They feel that they are bound to remain technologically handicapped, even if they make efforts to learn the technological skills. We have to do away with these stereotypical notions, because till the time these are not shattered, the senior citizens would always remain like very hesitant in learning things. So we can probably bring on board media houses and journalists and other organizations to do away with these misconceived perceptions. We could have a advertisement campaign which shows senior citizens as active and able learners, like learners who can learn or acquire digital skills even at advanced ages, right? So it's time that we start recognizing the senior citizens as inquisitive and able learners, right? It's very important to do that, because till the time we do that, they will always continue to remain in the digital dark. The onus is on us to pull them out from this digital darkness and bring them into this era of digital enlightenment, right? So we all have a very important role to play. Like many of us, like for me, I would remember that I would keep telling my grandparents that they'll never be able to use smartphones. But gradually, I do realize that they have the necessary will to learn these digital skills. My grandfather, at the age of 85, he started using started using his smartphone. He learned how to use and navigate the digital world. It was not something very difficult for him. All that was needed from his end was persistence and inquisitiveness, which he had. So my this thinking that he'll never be able to learn that proved to be wrong, right? So probably all of us should learn to drop this stereotypical imagination and give the seniors the necessary space to acquire the digital skills, right? Apart from that, another this was about the stereotypical notions being as one barrier to digital access and digital equity. Another thing that is a barrier for digital participation of senior citizens is that many times the websites or the applications which are developed are not friendly for the senior citizens. Like maybe the font size is too small, or there are too many links in a particular web page, or the web page is convoluted in design. This many a times happens because senior citizens are not taken on board by the web designers. So it's very important that co-designing starts taking place. We bring on board the senior citizens, take their inputs, ask them what are the challenges that they face when they are navigating through the digital world. probably every company, every government department can take a review from the senior citizens, take their feedback, and simultaneously develop their websites in such a way which is friendly for the senior citizens. We could probably have like design web pages in such a way which offer speech to text facilities or text to speech facility. We could have like specially designed keyboards for senior citizens. We could have specially designed mouse for senior citizens, so that when they are typing out things or trying to make entries, they do not face the difficulties that they have hitherto faced, right? So these are some of the ways we can address these challenges. Other than that, another challenge that remains is that many a times senior citizens find themselves to be like, they think that the social media is not for them, and because of the psychological impairments that they suffer from, they are unable to make maximum use of these social media platforms. So it's very important that we also take on board these social media platforms, ask them to revamp their sites in such a way that senior citizens think of these as approachable and like useful tools of connecting with the world. So these are some of the ways in which we can overcome the barriers which lead to digital inequity and digital inaccessibility, right? Here, before like I conclude, I would also like to say that it's totally wrong to believe that once a digital divide has started taking place, or if a digital divide exists, it can never be bridged, right? Digital divide is something which can be bridged. It is not something which is cast in stone and cannot be corrected. All we need is the necessary political will and personal will to address these concerns, right? So we could draw examples from foreign countries which have like received, which have achieved considerable success in bridging the digital chasm, right? For example, in Canada, this digital chasm in the e-banking sector has been considerably addressed. What they've done is that they have started appointing senior champs who are bank officials who specifically cater to the needs of the senior citizens. They are given the responsibility of revamping the bank websites in such a way so as to make them friendly for the senior citizens. These are the people who visit the senior citizens at their places, teach them how to do e-banking, teach them how to apply online for things, teach them how to like apply for a loan maybe, or how to give their life certificates, etc. So even we in India, the banks in India could appoint such personnel who can be dedicated to the issue of the older population, and then they can be given weekly targets to train and tutor these many senior citizens in digital in use of digital technology and e-banking. So this is one good starting point. Another measure that we can probably take, like this is from the point of view of banking that I'm saying, that we could have this concept of mobile banks which have been adopted in a few other Western countries. What they do is that they have a mobile bank with that is a bank on the wheels, which have an ATM facility, and the senior citizens can use these mobile banks, withdraw money, make payments online, drop in applications for like availing other banking services, etc. So we in India could also do that. These mobile banks could visit certain like old age homes or certain areas where there is a greater density of older population, older people, and they can make these services available to them at their doorsteps, right? Similarly, we could also adopt measures for peer learning, peer digital learning. What we can do is that among senior citizens also we have these two categories. One category of senior citizens are the inquisitive types and very like adaptive. They adapt to the digital technology really fast. So these proactive senior citizens could be used to tutor the other relatively inactive or relatively inquisitive or hesitant senior citizens in use of digital technology. So what would this help in? Basically, when peers teach you, you tend to grasp things better. So when senior citizens teach other senior citizens, the learning would be much more faster and deeper. So these are some of the ways which India too could adopt to spread digital literacy. Right. And I think without literacy, this issue of digital inequity can never be addressed. Right. So it's time we rise to the occasion. We think of different ways to address these issues of digital inequity, because till the time we are able to bring the benefits of digital technology to the doorsteps of the senior citizens, I think our country cannot achieve the potential it has, right? And if this digital divide is not addressed in a timely manner, this can become a major civil rights issue or a human rights issue, because so many services which are now online would continue to be denied to the senior citizens. So it's time we started working on things, and hopefully in the times to come, maybe COVID-19 pandemic has a silver lining, and this issue of digital literacy will gain necessary importance, and proactive steps would be taken, and senior citizens would be assimilated in the mainstream, right? So North Cap University, I think, has done a commendable job in organizing this. Like this was from the academic perspective that I spoke, but I hope there will be many civil society organizations, many other private companies who will actually walk the talk and come up with means to help the senior citizens. So with this, I'll end my talk. I'll hand over the session to Tavleen to carry it forward, right? Tavleen?
Thank you, ma'am, for such an enlightening session. We are waiting for a few questions. Ma'am, meanwhile, I would like to start the Q&A round. Ma'am, I have one question to ask. Ma'am, since you mentioned about the ageist, tendencies, like people have this ageist notions that since they have crossed that age, so they would have learning disabilities, they would not be able to, adapt to these modern day technology. But ma'am, how to deal with these internal ageist tendencies, whereby the elders themselves feel that, that now they won't be able to learn this new technology. So when they have internalized this ageist tendencies, so how should we address these notions? Ma'am, could you please throw some light on it?
Right. See, senior citizens, they probably internalize these ageist tendencies because they are surrounded by such people who constantly remind them that they are bound to remain technologically handicapped. So when the external surroundings, when their external perceptions change, probably there'll be a lot of unlearning going on simultaneously, right? These stereotypical notions can be broken by a kind of osmosis of positive thoughts, right? If we in the family start telling our parents that, oh, you've come a long way, like you were educated in like very average level schools or schools which did not have the necessary facilities, but even then you did so well, you made our lives so comfortable, you have that thing within you, you have that spark within you that only needs rekindling. I'm sure these internal stereotypes, these internally ingrained notions that they are bound to remain technologically handicapped would gradually dilute and wither away. So it's more than them. I think the effort needs to come from the other family members, from youngsters like us, because and probably we should introspect and think that maybe we are the present youngsters, the young present, but we'll also be the future old. So we need to like keep this in mind and keep telling our parents and grandparents that they can learn. And this is something that I'm telling from my personal experience. I would always tell my grandfather that he does not need a smartphone, but he did make a concerted effort, and he's probably like, he was able to start using the smartphone. He started doing video calls also. So that's something that even they will learn gradually. So I hope that addresses your question, Tavleen.
Absolutely, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, we have the next question from Kshitij. Now, ma'am, he wants to know that how to overcome the stubbornness that elderly have regarding the use of technology, keeping in mind the high illiteracy among them.
See, I think illiteracy is not a factor because agar dekha jaye to youngsters, maybe many of them are not like very literate, or maybe they have very elementary schooling, but even the youngsters are able to read or navigate the digital world, right? Like, I'll just draw an example. In many of the villages, you will see that maybe they are just class 2 dropouts or class 4 dropouts, but they're still able to use TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, etc. So it's not a question of literacy, it's more about will. Because, and if we are able to simplify the digital platforms, if we are able to simplify the web pages, etc., I'm sure even the senior citizens will be able to navigate it, right? And as I said earlier, it's not about stubbornness, I think, like that the elderly have, that they'll not be able to. It's probably some sort of an inferiority complex or some sort of an insecurity that they have, and this is probably the result of constant pestering by us, that they lack the necessary like skills or the necessary aptitude to learn that. If we start giving them positive affirmation that they can learn it at any stage of life, I'm sure this perceived stubbornness on the part of the senior citizens would gradually be diluted. For example, like, just digressing a bit from the topic, like many people think that elderly people cannot pursue higher courses or cannot go in for education, but there are examples of ladies even at the age of 99 that they have written examinations, class 10 examinations, and they come out with flying colors. We had this example of a lady, 99-year-old lady in Kerala, who passed her class 10th examination. So had we like told that lady that she cannot pass an examination at that age, at the fag end of her life, then probably like she would have given up all hopes and not appeared for the examination. But the family members, the government agencies in Kerala actually promoted her and encouraged her to actually sit for the exam, and she did come out with flying colors. So it's a question of will. And I think stubbornness, if they are stubborn in not learning, I think they can also acquire stubbornness for learning the digital skills, provided we give them the necessary confidence, right?
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, we have two questions and they are somewhat related. So I'll just read them out, ma'am. Ma'am, so first question is, what about the digital frauds that are taking place in this digital era? And this is asked by Madhav. And another related question, which is asked by Shrikant, it is that related to cybersecurity, that he says that in today's time, there are a number of cyber crimes which are taking place, and such breach happens, we cannot be around the elders all the time. So what are the best ways to deal with such situations?
See, cyber fraud is not something which can be problematic only for senior citizens. Even we can be conned and we can be duped by the cyber criminals, because let us acknowledge this fact that these cyber criminals are much more smarter than all of us, probably using or navigating through the cyber world, right? They always come up with new means to dupe people. So senior citizens, as a preemptive step to protect them from being defrauded, what we can do is that in the digital literacy classes, we can also have classes on cyber security. We can tell them as to which are the sites to visit, which are the unreliable or the reliable sites, how to figure out which is a reliable site, like HTTP है या HTTPS है, उस तरीके की चीजें, या कोई टेलीकॉलर अगर आपसे OTP मांगे तो आप शेयर मत करना, या इस टाइप का अगर कोई मैसेज आता है तो report it to the police, etc. So these are some of the things that can be incorporated in the digital curriculum. Thereafter, like, apart from the agencies which take up the task of promoting digital literacy, we can also bring on board the police, right? The cyber cells of different states can probably organize sessions for the senior citizens. They have a database of the senior citizens. Just a minute, please. Tavleen, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, there was some connectivity issue here. So basically, we can ask the cyber crime cell to take these sessions for the senior citizens, and they can probably share examples as to how senior citizens were duped, and this would put the senior citizens on guard in a way, and they would probably learn from the mistakes of others, right? So I think cyber crime cells have a very important role to play. Here in Delhi, we have a very like technologically equipped cyber cell, which has been organizing series of such sessions for the senior citizens, right? They have been spreading awareness. They have been coming to the rescue of senior citizens and protecting them from cyber frauds. Although I cannot say with like 100% confidence that cyber frauds will be totally eliminated, but these steps can go a long way in mitigating the risks of being defrauded online, right? So, and Tavleen, what was the second question that you'd asked? I'm sorry, I missed the second question, the connected question that you have put.
Ma'am, it was pertaining to the cyber crimes.
Right. So basically, these are some of the ways, and like if you visit the Delhi Police website, you will have like modules on cyber security and all. So there's need that we spread awareness about these modules so that senior citizens go through it and probably learn how to navigate the cyber world in a safer and more secure manner. Right? Yes, Tavleen.
Yes, ma'am, we have a question from Mahima Mahajan. Ma'am, she wants to know that since the literacy rate of elderly women is much less as compared to that of elderly men, so the policies undertaken by our government do not cater to the less educated elderly women. So isn't the government easily ignoring them?
See, there are intersectionality of vulnerabilities involved, right? One vulnerability is age-related vulnerability. Senior citizens as a class are vulnerable. There are further divisions in this vulnerable group, the males and the females, right? Conventionally in India, females are not as educated as males, so it's more likely that they'll not be able to navigate the digital world or like use technology in the better manner. So the first starting point should be to cater to the needs of senior citizens irrespective of the gender. Once that is addressed, then the policies could further be fine-tuned to cater to the needs of women, like, right? So probably the good starting point would be to first provide subsidies to all senior citizens irrespective of their age to purchase digital equipments. Once that objective is met, we could further have like greater subsidies for women. We could have special classes for women who are illiterate for using these technologies, etc. Right? So incrementally, it cannot be like everything can be achieved overnight. It is a work in progress. First, we could probably address the age-related vulnerabilities and thereafter address the gender-related vulnerabilities. Ideally, both vulnerabilities ought to be addressed simultaneously, but given the resource constraints, etc., the senior citizens as a class needs to be addressed first, right? And to just mention here, it's not something that is specific only in India that women suffer more because they are illiterate. It's something that is seen even in the Western world. Women are very often not having the same level of digital access vis-a-vis the male counterparts, right? So, but then even there, they are targeting the age group first and then coming to the gender related things, right? So hopefully in the times to come, this issue will also be addressed, right? Yes,
Yes, ma'am, we have a few more questions. Ma'am, next question is from Nidhi. Ma'am, Nidhi is thanking you for such an enriching lecture. And then, ma'am, she's posing the question that she's saying that I really like the idea of creating a module for senior citizens to educate them about the digital services being offered. Then she asks, do you think we should create a specific module for them to inform them about the necessary healthcare facilities available near them and the digital procedures that may need to be followed to avail such services?
Yes, thank you so much for the question and that input. I cited an example from San Francisco where they have such modules. Even in India, the NGOs are contributing their bit. If you visit the web page of HelpAge India, you will see they have this module on cyber crimes. They have this module on digital literacy, right? So probably we could take use of these modules, circulate these amongst the senior citizens that we know. That is our part that we can do, our bit that we can contribute towards bringing digital literacy to the doors of the senior citizens, right? Similarly, like as you said, that we could probably have a compilation of things like the health facilities for senior citizens. Yes, that's a very good idea. There again, the government ministries can probably compile a list of web pages of different hospitals, different health insurance companies, etc., and make it available on their portal as a ready reckoner, so that the senior citizen visiting that page just clicks on that and he has all the necessary links, necessary information about different health facilities, etc. So that's a very good starting point. Here in India, the Ministry of Justice and Social Empowerment, I think, is looking after the issues concerning the senior citizens. So probably they can compile such a list and put it on their portal so that the senior citizens can make use of that. And the civil society organizations which are working in the field of geriatric issues can thereafter publicize this web portal, these links, so that senior citizens are able to make most use of these things, right? So that's a very good suggestion that has come from your end. Yes,
Ma'am, the next question is from Rohit. Ma'am, he asks that, ma'am, do you think that Senior Citizens Act is sufficient to counter the offenses against the geriatric population?
Could you repeat that again, Taveen? Do you think Senior
Citizens Act is sufficient to counter the offenses against the geriatric population?
See, the Maintenance of Senior Citizens and Parents Act, the 2007 Act, that alone, that standalone legislation is not sufficient to address all concerns which plague the senior citizens. That basically deals with the issue of maintenance of senior citizens and parents, etc. But there are a whole host of other crimes that take place against senior citizens. I think for meeting those things, the other criminal legislations, IPC, etc., or the IT Act go a long way in addressing that. So the 2007 legislation is not a umbrella legislation covering all issues that plague the senior citizens. Right.
Ma'am, we have two last questions for you. Ma'am, the first one being that Gorangi wishes to know that for those senior citizens who reside within the old age homes, what measures can be taken? What measures can we as students take to bring awareness regarding digital equity and competence?
Yes, Tavleen, please go ahead.
Ma'am, should I repeat the question? Because since they have this visit outreach initiative which is planned, so I feel that her question is very, very relevant, that she is very specifically intends to know that how, they as students, how can they bring awareness about this digital equity and competence?
Right. So that's a very thoughtful question that just shows that these students have this true intent of actually contributing their bit towards this very important cause. And I must congratulate the North Cap University for having such programs so that even the students can align themselves with these social initiatives, right? So for that, when you're visiting old age homes, you could probably ask them whether you can volunteer with them, whether you can probably take a day out in a week, probably on Sundays or Saturdays when you do not have classes, give 2 hours, 3 hours, associate with these agencies. Then you can probably you can ask them whether they permit you to have sessions with those elderly people, or you can just ask them to assign 2 old age people living in those old age homes to you, and then you could have a personalized interaction with them. You can probably take your smartphone, show them how you navigate the social media platforms, how you use the online facilities for making online purchases or for connecting with your friends and family members. So these personalized interactions is one way in which you can promote digital literacy. This is at the institutional level when you're visiting an old age home. Other than that, life offers you many other avenues to actually interact with senior citizens. Maybe there's some auntie who stays in your apartment. Probably she's not very technologically savvy, and you see her grappling with these issues. Maybe she's not able to use the digital technology or the internet in the manner it is intended to. So probably you could just take few minutes out daily or weekly to teach that auntie how to use the digital technology. So these are the small means in which you can do that. Other than that, probably you and your classmates and your peers can like brainstorm and come up with other ideas to promote digital literacy, and then make a compilation of these and hand it over to the like NGO working in this field. And probably they can then partner with suppose there's some computer company like Wipro or Infosys, etc., and they can then work on your ideas and make tools or make like necessary changes in their working pattern to spread digital literacy. So these are the means in which you can probably contribute towards this cause. Yes, Tavleen.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, so the last question for this session, ma'am, this person intends to know that should regulatory bodies make it mandatory for technology companies to make old age friendly devices so as to continue doing business in their regions, or should we expect the companies to understand this void and address this issue without any external force?
See, making things mandatory may prove to be counterproductive many a time, because many a times we have rules for everything, but when it comes to compliance, there are lapses. So there has to be some sort of a self-motivation and self-monitoring by the companies also. Probably what can be done is that we could use persuasive tools so as to bring the companies on board. We can make it a part of corporate social responsibility for the companies to devise means and technologies to make their web portals or make the devices senior citizen friendly, right? So like for example, there's some company which manufactures like keyboards and computer components. So we cannot have a mandate for everything, because it's not within the like purview of the government to regulate everything. We cannot be a license Raj, or we cannot be an overly regulatory economy. What we can do is we can ask these companies to come up with ways to make these computer keyboards very friendly for the senior citizens, with bigger keys, with greater spacing, etc. Similarly for the mouse, we could also ask them, like many of the senior citizens, they have visibility issues probably. With declining health, their eyesight deteriorates. So braille enabled keyboards could be given at subsidized rates to senior citizens. So for all this, I think persuasion and suasion acts as a more convincing tool rather than as a regulatory regime that should be in place. Yes, Tavleen.
Yeah. So, ma'am, on behalf of North Cap University School of Law, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to you, ma'am, for sparing your valuable time and sensitizing our students and all the participants about this pertinent issue. So thank you, ma'am, for such an enlightening session.
Thank you so much, Tavleen. Thank you, and have a good day, all of you.
We have our next speaker for this workshop, Dr. Diksha Bajpai Tiwari. Ma'am is a reader in the Dayal Singh College, University of Delhi, and she has completed her education BA Honours, MA, MPhil, and PhD from University of Delhi. Her doctoral work was on the topic Social Impact Assessment of Slum Resettlement in Delhi. She joined Dayal Singh College in 2001. Previously, she has worked in Delhi School of Economics, Miranda House, and Shivaji College. She was an external consultant to a project awarded by the Ministry of Law and Justice titled Analysis of Functioning of Legal Aid Cells in Various Law Schools, Universities, Departments, Private Universities, which was given to the University School of Law and Legal Studies, Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University, Delhi. She was a subject expert for the Consortium for Education Communication for review of mock proposals. She has provided training in the Directorate of Training, the Nodal Institute for conducting in-service training for the Government of NCT of Delhi, and delivered lectures to 17 Danix probationers of 58th batch undergoing two-year training at the Directorate. She has been invited as a key resource person in a number of workshops and training programs. She has been invited to be a plenary speaker in a number of national and international conferences of prestigious institutions, namely NLU Delhi, Kathmandu School of Law, Kirorimal College, Nirma University, etc. She is also the co-project director of the research program titled Building the Resilience of the Elderly Against the Vulnerabilities Post-COVID-19, an exploratory study of Kerala, which has been submitted to the Indian Council of Social Science Research. Her teaching and research areas are urban spaces, impact assessment, displacement studies, human development, social well-being, gender and development studies. Ma'am, on behalf of the School of Law, I welcome you for the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning, Tavleen. It's a pleasure to meet you after some time. Good morning to everybody who's present here. It is indeed a matter of great honor to be among students of a different university, and it is always a pleasure to speak to minds who are bubbling with ideas, because they are the ones who are the source of inspiration, source of, if I may say, the entire process of learning actually gets rejuvenated when one is amongst students. And it is with this idea that I would be speaking on, as I was listening to the last part of the talk that was going on, which was on probably the Senior Citizens Act that we have. When I was invited to deliver this lecture, I was not very sure as to what should be the focus of my talk, whether it should be from the legal safeguards that are available, or how the administrative realities work vis-a-vis the elderly. So I had a talk with Tavleen, and I made it absolutely clear to her that you may have much more experienced legal experts to speak about the legal provisions, the safeguards that are available to the elderly in this country. So where should I place this talk? What should be the focal point? What should be the fulcrum on which this entire discussion should be based on? And I somehow thought that let me start speaking by dividing this entire talk into two sections. One is why are we actually talking about digital equity? And secondly, why are we talking about digital equity for all ages? And it is with great significance that I'm using the word all ages, and I'm not taking the word elderly. The issue with this entire discourse about the older people anywhere in the world, and more so in the countries uh, where the proportion of elderly is actually going to rise in the very near future, is the, if I may use the word, is the overtly patronizing attitude towards the senior members. The approach towards a group of population which is more that of a provider, rather than an approach which should be enabling. It is not as if provisions and special safeguards have to be in order for the older people. The focus of the policy should be such that, in addition to everybody else's demands, their demands should also be mainstreamed. It is not as if the others, the administration or the policymakers are making special provisions they are making provisions for a very, very significant portion of their own demographics. They are significant numbers today, and they have to basically be enabled to start acting as a, a group of population which is not inert. Rather, it has its own set of demands, which they are fully capable of making, and these demands have to be taken care of. There has to be supply for the demands that this age group is making. Uh, Rather than getting into a rhetoric of making special provisions, the policies have to be built in such a manner that there is an inbuilt discussion of the older people, the elderly. The entire discourse has to be set in that light. So this entire talk is going to be divided into probably two sections. One would be I'll be trying to sensitize why is there a need uh, for this discussion about the elderly. We may be a lot of us who are right now speaking and talking and discussing and listening even belong to a group of people, uh, or that section of the demographic profile of this country, which may not be calling themselves as elderly, but we certainly are a group of people, a cohort, which is going to, in all probabilities and God willing, be part of that profile about which we are discussing today. And so the first section is on understanding why is there this renewed discussion on the elderly population. What is the proportion of older people that we are going to see in very, very near future in terms of our own country and the world in total? That would kind of sensitize you to the number of people that are going to be impacted by whatever is being discussed today. It is not random that United Nations has started celebrating the Day of the Elderly, the decade of happy aging, healthy aging. It is not random. There has to be a policy prescription. There has to be a preparation for the times that are going to be around and around very, very soon. So that will be the first part. The second part would obviously be on digital equity, how to improve. I'll be talking about certain best practices that other countries have been able to start, to continue, and one would only wish to see something like that happening in our country. At smaller levels, it has already started, but it needs to be pan India. It needs to be addressed and addressed effectively. So I'll just try and share my screen. Just give me a minute. I'll just do it. Yeah, thank you.
Diksha ma'am? Ma'am? Okay. All right.
Just give me a minute, please.
Sure, ma'am.
I hope the screen is visible to all of you.
Yes, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you, ma'am.
Is the screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay, so this is what one is going to speak, and probably we are here to discuss this digital equity. But much before straight away jumping on to what digital equity is, let's very quickly talk about certain facts. There are two non-negotiable facts that's happening. First, obviously the world is aging, and the second is that there is an immense requirement of or immense progress in digitalization that is happening. So we know that for the first time ever, there are more number of people who are over 64 years of age than children who are younger than 5. I hope and I suppose that all of us are aware of the dependency ratios, the age groups of population, whether young or elderly, who are termed as dependent on the working age populations, working age being from 15 to 60, 64. In most countries, it is taken to be 49 to 50, 54. But there are obviously differences amongst the countries between developed and the developing world. There are countries where children, a large proportion of children population have to start working before the age of 15. And then there are those countries where elderly also have the access to work, which is absent in certain other countries. We know for sure that there are differences amongst countries of the developed world and the developing world. Uh, Most of your countries of the developed world have had this transition, what we say as demographic transition, much earlier than certain countries of the developing world. Whether you take the case of United States, it happened. The under fives were already outnumbered by older than 64 years as early as 1966. In Spain, it happened in 1970. In Italy, it happened in somewhere around 1971, 72. South Korea, it happened in 2000. Why is it relevant? It is relevant to understand the age structure of a population, because the entire policy orientation, the demand for policy reorientation, the demand for allocations that are to be made is definitely based on the structures that we have in terms of demographics. In India, it is projected to be very near as 2028. In South Africa, it is going to happen in 2036. I would also like to wish to point out that most of your developing countries, or those countries which are the low income economies, as we may call them, are the ones which are relatively younger, and they are going to age now and age very fast. What does it mean? It simply means that the countries which are slightly uh, wanting in terms of their policy orientation towards the elderly are going to be the countries where this process of aging is going to happen very soon. It's happening. It is going to happen very soon. The proportion of the elderly population is going to rise very soon. Secondly, these are also the countries which are large population countries of the world. So the number of older people in terms of the total population of the world, their proportion is set to rise. Their numbers are set to rise. And therefore, the approach towards the requirements, the needs of the age group that we are referring to needs to be, the orientation has to change, and change very quickly. uh, Added to the agony is also a fact, and this what I'm going to say right now is going to probably take your coordinator, Dr. Tavleen, back to a huge discussion, a very long discussion that we had about the relevance of discussing or putting focus on the elderly in a country where the younger population, whom we very energetically call the population dividend, the demographic dividend, that they are the dividend, they are the future on which the entire uh, national wealth is depending. Uh, in a country where the proportion of younger people are so huge that we are called a young nation, are we not discussing or trying to focus on a set of population? And the phrase that was very categorically used in that discussion was, who have already lived their lives, as if there is no life beyond a certain age. And during that discussion, what was brought to force was the fact that somebody turns elderly just on his or her retirement date. One day less and one day more, suddenly the entire description, discourse, expectation, everything changes. Everything undergoes a change. So that also is actually a policy ingredient that one will have to take care of. That what are we going to discuss about a demographic group in a country where the younger demographic group is also looking out for opportunities? are we not taking away somebody else's opportunity, giving it to somebody else? If we start talking about elderly occupation, employment, pensions, etc., etc. So in this scenario, one would be putting the entire discussion on how early are we going to, the world is going to age. It is going to be as early as 2050, when 1 in 6 people in the world will be over the age of 65. And in 2019, it was 1 in 11. I am specifically not talking about how COVID-19 has impacted this discussion. I'm just keeping it aside for now. All this discussion about numbers, about years, about the significance, about relevance has changed with the pandemic and what the world has seen. But I'm for the time being, I'm not discussing that. This is how the world is going to grow old, if I may say. This is how the aging is going to happen, starting with 2050. If you look at this map, you'll get a fair idea about how a larger portion of the world is going to have more than 30% of their population to be 60 years older. Do not get very carried away by the fact that we belong to the second category, between 10 to 30%. What we should all be realizing is that our 10% is much bigger than their 30%. The world that we are talking about in terms of 30%, our 10% contribution to the total population is going to be much higher than their 30%. So the relevance of policy making for the elderly should not escape anybody. This is what the global population pyramid looks like, and it is uh, uh, with a degree of certainty that most of us know that these pyramids are actually a pictorial, simplistic pictorial representation of the entire demographic history. If one needs to understand how, where, what, how quickly, how late in the history any event of changing population structure is going to happen, these pyramids work immensely well. Right from 1950, if one goes to 2100, and just for our discussion, the areas that are marked in the yellow color, the shades of yellow, is the one that we are keenly interested in, even though the dark blue colors are the ones that these are the shades that is going to make provisions for the yellow ones. The if we if, World over, there is improvement in the health infrastructure. There is lessening of fertility, lowering of the fertility rates. People who are born are going to live a longer life. There is a higher longevity that the world is seeing, and therefore, by the turn of the century, we will probably see uh, a higher proportion of the elderly population in the world. Uh, and this is where we are actually starting with 2007-8. That is the time when this entire demographic history is being turned, and therefore there is this need for discussion on the elderly population. This is just to give an idea about how quickly the population is aging in certain countries. If you look at the countries that are being talked about or discussed around 2000, the year 2000, and post that, are the countries which are so-called in the bracket of upper middle income, or the ones which were earlier middle income countries. The ones who have already doubled their aged population were the developed countries of the world. This fact may be reiterated again and again, but the policy discussions, the preparation that the population requires for taking care of a population age group which is going to increase very, very soon, will make all the difference for how we perceive the aged, the geriatric age group. On an average, people have been living for 20 years longer than they were living earlier. Uh, the idea is, how are they going to spend these extra 20 years? There can be options that are lined up here, but I'm sure looking at uh, the stereotypes that we associate age with, the the discussion that we always seem to center around when we start talking about elderly, do not out of the four options, probably the ones that come to our mind is either the family time, or in this order itself, family time, traveling. Rarely will you find discussion on further education, or for that matter, employment. But this is how the world will have to start thinking, because on an average, people are adding 20 more years to their lives. They cannot just sit idle, being provided by somebody else for 20 years of their lifespan. Uh, if we talk about aging in India, I've been saying that it is a story of dividends and aging population. The section that is marked in light blue and gray is actually the dependent population, one which is less than 15, the other one which is elderly, 65 years and plus. And if you put, for your understanding, let's put it this way, that from 2040 onwards, or 2020 onwards, till about the turn of the century, if you put blue and gray together, it is almost the same as the red shade. It is almost the same as the red shade. So what does this mean in a common parlance? It means that for everybody who is working, there would be one person who would be dependent. The so-called dependent could be a young dependent or an old dependent. Now, working age population and this dependency ratio has been replaced. This entire discussion has been replaced by the fact that when you talk of dependency ratio, you assume that everybody in that working age group is working. And there is another even bigger assumption that everybody in that dependent age group is also not working. Rather than doing that, if one tries to understand the labor force dependency ratios, that is, what is the percent of dependent people to the labor force of the country, that will give you an idea about for every working population component, what provision needs to be made for every single dependent. The figures, the ratios would come to be much higher than one. And when it comes higher than one, it means that everybody who is working has to make provision for somebody else who's not working. And in a scenario where a large part of your working population gets its employment from the informal sector, gets its employment from a sector which has no safety nets associated to it, one can easily imagine the kind of uh, elderly population, these working age people, when they shift towards the grow in age and shift into the bracket of the elderly, the profile that they're going to take with themselves, there would be a horde of people whose for whom there would be negligible pension benefits. There would be a horde of people who have lived and worked all through their lives till that age, uh, where they have not been able to keep aside something or plan for their old age. So what is happening to the working population is actually going to impact what is going to happen in the very near future to the elderly as well. So rightly said, if one needs a happy, healthy aging process in any country, let's not take a piecemeal approach. Let's not take a very special provision kind of an approach, because it is integrated. What you plan for the workers today, the working population proportions today, is going to impact how healthy, happy, and empowered the aged are going to be in the near future, because that is an integration. They are working today, they may not be working later on, or there has to be provisions for how long can they work if they wish to, or else what are the provisions that the policy has to safeguard their interest. That is what the discussion should be. Now let's try and break certain myths about age and aging and the aged. If you look at the individual level indicators that one is talking about somewhere here, we will find that let's not there are about 44% of them are literate. uh, the rest are discussed here. I'm not so bothered about that, but there are about 74% of the 60 years and above people in India uh, who have ever worked, and there is a humongous 36% of 60 years and above people who are working, who are currently working. So the stereotype, the discussion, the narrative, the understanding that we develop, that as if 60 years and beyond is an age for relaxation, it is an age for non-economic employment, may not be true, may not be true. The discussions around policy formulations cannot negate the fact that about 36% of them are still working. What is most crucial is the fact that if 36% of them are working, it is as high as 65% of them are working in the agriculture sector, whereby there is no pension scheme, there is no security, there is no old age benefit that can accrue to you. Similarly, that is an understanding which your approach towards any of the demographics cannot be one size fit all kind of an approach. This is what your data, as far as India is concerned, is showing. So when about 65% of them derive their occupation from a sector which is inherently very, very risky business, the entire discussion about providing them with old age benefits and pension has to be discussed in that context. Um, Another reality that we should be talking about is this discussion on officially retired from organized sector. It's hardly 7.3% of the people. Currently receiving retirement pension, 5.7%. Not very, very successful looking percentages as far as the age group of people that we are talking about is concerned. Uh, so let's bring it now down to so it is not without just like that United Nations declared this entire decade as decade of healthy aging, by thereby asking the governments largely, then the civil society and all kind of agencies uh, to concentrate to improve the lives of the older people, their families, and the communities in which they live. What my understanding now is that this entire discussion on healthy aging actually rest very, very precariously between aging and ageism. Uh, we have been able to establish one fact, that the world is aging, which simply means that we are going to have a higher proportion of elderly people in the total population. What is so wrong in it? There is nothing wrong, or there is nothing problematic. There is a requirement for a renewed focus when a belief called ageism enters. Now, WHO defines it as the stereotypes, how we think, prejudice, how we feel, and discrimination, how we act, directed towards others or oneself based on age. Whenever we start discussing on about ageism, the entire study of gerontology, etc., will talk about ageism as if we are not party to that discussion, as if we believe something else, and there are others uh, who are party to this practice called ageism. But when you look at it, the set of socio-cultural norms that work on people who are not yet 60 are also the norms which are active on people who are 60 and above. They cannot be a different set of social norms, customs, understandings that people of different age groups have. There may be their understanding of the world, the technology, their access, their exposure, but the same set of stereotypes that are built in the minds of uh, uh, people who are not yet in that age group are also the stereotypes that are built in the minds of those who are in that age group too. Many a times the discussion about aged revolves around the fact, क्या जरूरत है, हमने कर लिया, अब क्या जरूरत है. But this kya zarurat hai, nobody knows for how long one is going to live. But for how long one is going to live with this kya zarurat hai discussion is going to increase in years. It is increasing every minute. Your life expectancy in this country is increasing. So, so this entire necessity-based discussion about aging, about relevance of living a very healthy and happy aged life does not actually have to be addressed to people who are now not elderly, but also to people who are elderly. It actually includes all of us, and that is the idea that one is trying to focus on, which is an integration of the discussions of which cannot be as a special provision for a certain age. It is an integration. One moves in age. One is one age today. It's going to be +1 tomorrow, and that +1 is going to be one day. One day here you are working. One day there you'll be termed as a retired person. So with changing, the biggest change that this one day is going to make to anybody's life is actually the fact of what we understand as ageism, the stereotypes that would be attached to you. So United Nations have declared the International Day of Older People, and they have talked about digital equity for all ages. Digital equity, now let's move to the second part of the discussion, which is on from where this digital equity has been brought to focus. Pandemic has not helped. Pandemic has exacerbated whatever inequities that were already there. they haven't, it has created new inequalities, agreed. But more than that, what it has brought to focus is the already existing inequalities, right there, open for discussion. It has brought, we all have been brought to a place where now we cannot escape. For example, we cannot escape to discuss the digital education. We may have been trying to not discuss it, but now we do not have an escape. And similarly, as far as equity for all ages is concerned, this is something that we cannot escape discussing now. It was whatever has been discussed previously was actually the background for making you understand that this digital equity is not somebody's figment of imagination, that suddenly you require a better access to digital technology. There has been a discussion about it. There has been a history associated with it, and pandemic has simply brought the necessity or essentialness of the whole discussion to the fore. We all know that there is expanding digitalization and what it can do. But there is associated with this digitalization is the digital exclusion. The word in itself is not monolithic. It is not monolithic. There is digital exclusions operating at various levels, and most of these levels are actually overlaid. It is multiple in nature. So there is a rural urban divide, there is a rich poor divide. This is the first digital divide that we have been discussing for years and years together now, is the ones that have and have nots, those who have an access to digital devices and those who have not. वो first level of digital divide tha. That was the first digital divide that we talked about. We are post first level of digital divide now. We are talking about the inaccessibility, the inappropriateness, the insecurity of the digitalization that is part and parcel of the second level of digital divide that one is talking about. Whether this digital exclusion, especially coming to the elderly, it simply excludes a section of the population from operationalizing the tasks that they are capable of operating. It just excludes them from having a life which is more filled with opportunities, because it is digital in nature. It is not so much their incapacities, their incapabilities. It is more like changing the goalpost or changing the orientation, and then asking a proportion of population, a section of population, to start learning new, and thereby questioning their capacities. They were very capable in the non-digital world, and their capacities and capabilities are being questioned when the world has turned digital. Nothing has been done to their capacities. Something has been done to the world, and the goalpost has changed, and their capacities are being questioned. It can be very demoralizing. It can be very, very disturbing for people who have worked for so long. They have the intent and capacities to work right now as well, but their capacities are being questioned because the goalpost has changed. And this is exactly what the feeling of a lot of elderly is. When a pilot study was conducted for the project that we are part of in the state of Kerala, which we were trying to apply, we conducted a pilot study, and that is one feeling that a lot of elderly discussion with people of a certain age has brought out the sense of desolation, the sense of being questioned about their capacities is something that they are most worried about. In addition to their healthcare requirements, etc., etc., but the very idea that they may not be knowing uh, aspects which were not needed to be known earlier, but have become very essential in the new world. That is what the elderly is bothered about. We have been trying to understand this divide, because as far as a person who is in late 40s, I have been I've been intrigued by this entire terminologies of digital natives and digital immigrants, digital nomads. Uh, uh, I fail to understand a lot of them, but the idea that this entire discussion is seen through a lens of a at best a digital immigrant, and therefore I can understand and associate and probably can be a little more understanding towards what a generation would be feeling, who at a very later years of their lives have been told to reorient their entire learning towards a newer technology. Uh, uh, for natives, it is a native intelligence. They have been they are the blessed ones. I mean, the world is changing, and they are part of that change. For us immigrants, we have learned our way the hard way through, from non-digital to a digital world. But imagine a, a generation which has seen an absolutely non-digital world, then have struggled through making and using technology to a place where they have been asked that it has become essential for their existence now. So what does the digital inclusion actually includes for all? What does it include? It is a question of accessibility, it is a question of affordability, and it is also a question of infrastructure creation. The policies have to be adopted, the good practices have to be replicated, the accesses to ICTs have to increase. Uh, Also, the question of making the technology affordable uh, to all will be a question that will be very crucial for countries where the panorama of affordability is very wide, is very wide, is very non-inclusive. Countries like ours, where the the cheaper technologies have to be made available, uh, and have to be made available with a service provision that can be taken care of at their end. So it's a huge country, huge diversities, huge distances. Imagine the cost of providing a service in as diverse areas as Ladakh, Thar Desert, the coastal areas, the certain states of the northeastern India, and the cost that is involved and the diversity that this inclusion will have to make provisions for. What are the barriers that are there in adopting these technologies? Uh, there is a lack of digital skills, which the elderly cannot be they're not to be blamed. They were very apt at technologies that were relevant to them at the time that they were working. Now that their professional life has come to an end and they're searching for a newer professional life, uh, the the next question that arises is to upgrade these digital skills, and that is where the community has a role to play. That is where the administration has a role to play. That is where the government has a role to play. Why I put the community first and government probably later on is the fact that we together live in a community where younger and the older people live together. Uh, uh, of course, we have an increasing, and the proportion is increasing, uh, percentage of older people who are living in the care homes. Uh, uh, the role of community therefore becomes all the more increasing or important or significant because there needs to be an upgradation of technology, upgradation of skills, and there has to be uh, a removal of that fear of technology amongst the elderly. Most crucial, probably, out of the various barriers that we can talk about, and I can go on length at talking about the barrier of ageism towards technology adoption and its use. There are stereotypes, there are prejudices, uh, not just amongst the non elderlies about the abilities of the elderly, but also amongst the elderly towards their own capacities, because their capacities, that the questions have been uh, 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 put about their own capacities for so long that there have been generations and generations, the stereotypes have been there. What is the role of an elderly in the house? To take care of the family, to take care of the children, to probably go fetch milk, and we never ever, and that is how even the local popular media seems to be solidifying this entire narration. They never try and thinking of any advertisement that you can ever think of whereby the elderly of the house is not shown or is shown in any other capacity but taking care of the children, being very nice to the grandchildren, taking care of the children needs, etc., etc., etc. There has this, and that is where, because popular culture, what you see in terms of advertisement, in terms of cinema, in terms of the 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 the, the motives that you see around in popular culture is the one that we call the socio-cultural background, the socio-cultural reality of today. Nowhere will you ever find any other narration but this. So this is how stereotypes are built. This is how stereotypes are perpetuated. This is how an understanding is built amongst the larger masses about what they should be thinking and how they should be thinking, rather than giving an opportunity to an alternative thinking. And that is the entire discussion on ageism, what ageism does to inculcate this stereotype. Uh, the other thing that I need to there is physical and cognitive impairment associated to age, but all of this actually is interrelated. I will just talk about uh, uh, two things. One is design, and other is relevance. Okay, so I will probably skip this. I'll straight away talk about an unfriendly design of technology. There needs to be discussion about the unfriendliness of the design of a digital technology. The alternative, we all of us are very well aware of the fact that most of the people on the other side of 60, they use the internet or the digital technology on the smartphones. Now, how smart are those smartphones for the elderly? Uh, uh, when you just do this market survey, find out find out if one is really interested in working on gerontology, geriatrics, or the elderly studies, or any of this. They should try and find out what kind of smartphones are available for the elderly. Are there any smartphones which are specially designed to take care of the elderly? One. Secondly, have these designs been created by participation of elderly as stakeholders? How many of them, how many companies have changed their designs of smartphones to make it elderly friendly? There are two things to be considered here. One, smartphones specially for the elderly, and smartphones whereby the technology has been changed to make it more friendly towards the elderly. There can be a technology, there can be a design which may be a cutting edge, which make provisions for the elderly usage within the given design. Where have that been? I'm talking about this can be a market research that the students can undertake. Which are those companies, which are those leading brands which make two? One, special provision for elderly phones. That is one, that is special provision. But more importantly than that, how many companies are actually changing their designs, keeping in mind the profile of people who are going to use them? They are customers. At the end of the day, they are also customers. So there is a presumption, even within the digital designing, that the age group that one is catering to is not 60 plus. And this presumption is what should need to be. There is a grave need to alter this. There is a grave requirement for mainstreaming the demands of the elderly outside the presumption of them being non-users, them being non-customers base, them being the ones for whom the technology is not created. Now, on one hand, this entire digital equity is being discussed about how to include the elderly. And when you talk of that inclusion, you are talking about special provisions. You are not talking about inclusion in the real sense of the word, where the technology makes space for their inclusion, their existence as part of the mainstream, not as part of a special category. Special provisions are very good, but for any of the discussions of the marginalized, so-called marginalized, there has to be a discussion on them about their mainstreaming. There cannot be a discussion which is devoid of this making spaces within the normal, the regular, the daily usage of technology. But I have yet to find out any literature, any company which has made provisions or change in their designing, whereby the demands of the elderly have been, A, there has been consultation, B, the entire technology, the entire designing has undergone a change so that there is a provision for the requirements of the elderly that is done as part of their regular branding and selling techniques. None has been done. But this discussion on digital equity, I guess, would be piecemeal, would be not sufficient till the time the mainstreaming is done. There is physical and cognitive impairments which are associated with the elderly. And that is where there is a requirement for the increasing role of community towards programs of digital literacy. And I am a very, very firm believer, we get into the rhetoric of इतना बड़ा देश है, इतने सारी diversities है, rural area है, urban area है. This entire rural urban divide is actually the starting point of all the discussion. But I am a very, very firm believer, when you can have adult education as a community program, as a government run program, similarly, that kind of involvement, governmental, administrative, community involvement is required to enhance the digital literacy of the elderly. That is all it takes. It is about orientation, it is about prioritization. Uh, and and especially in a country where others say that it may be a problematic issue in a country as big as India, uh, I I take it differently. It may come very naturally to us because we have and we take great pride in believing the family system, the 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 cultural background, the cultural sound, cultural focus on living together, living as part of the young and the old in the same household. Nothing can be better than this kind of cohabitation for programs of digital literacies to run in this country. Uh, there has been efforts which have been made by United Nations. There are key areas of action that they talk about, which is on universal connectivity, promoting digital public goods, ensuring digital inclusion, strengthening digital capacity building, ensuring the protection of human rights, supporting global cooperation, trust and security, effective architecture. Now, these are the key words that you should be looking at. These should not just sound like hollow words, because programs of digital inclusion, programs of creating technologies which are friendly towards the needs of the elderly, which provides answers to what the questions of the elderly are, uh, and then uh, to provide a, a, a safe environment for the elderly, so that they are more safe using those technology, is what the need of the hour is. This enhancing digital inclusion of older persons actually takes care of, or should be focused on, ensuring access to goods and services that involve digital technology, enhancing digital literacy. So, first question is of access. Second question is of improving their literacy. Third is to leveraging the potential of digital technologies for active and healthy aging and well-being and empowerment. Now, look at these words that are being used as policy documents: empowerment, well-being, healthy aging, digital technologies being available in an equitable world. All of this, and then the last one being the protection of the human rights, because their need for privacy, their need for independence, their need for dignity has to be answered in total. If you look at all of this put together, there are questions of increasing the accessibility. There are questions of enhancing the digital literacy, that is, improving the capabilities. There are questions of uh, uh, healthy aging, well being, empowerment, and then the human rights. So just to kind of sum up whatever I need to say, is probably the attitude towards inclusion, and more specifically digital inclusion of the elderly. The focus should not be towards preaching or uh, towards an attitude which is overpowering. Rather than that, the 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 focus of the approach towards digital inclusion of the elderly should be the one which is enabling, which is empowering, and which is taking care of their dignity. We miss out on any of these, their security, whether personal or the security of their lives, their property, their self confidence even will be at stake, and the world in total, as a whole, cannot afford to do that. By the sheer numbers of the people that we have in that age bracket, the mainstreaming of their demands will will become, or has already become, the need of an hour. Special provisions, special focus is good, but when you say until and unless the policies are not going to be, we used to say, stop being so naive to think that the policies are gender neutral, cannot be gender blind. The policies cannot be elderly blind. The policies cannot be elderly neutral. Cannot be, because we are, again, even if we start speaking about the elderly, we are presupposing the fact that elderly is a total group. There are as many inequalities, as many diversities, as many differentiated existences within this group called elderly, and the policy needs to make provisions for those as well. Only then can we talk of understanding the realities of the elderly, and being in a position and be ready to answer their demands. With that, I'll put a stop uh, to to my discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for such an enriching session. Ma'am, now I'll move on to the question answers. Ma'am, there's a question by Himanshu Rathi, and he wants to know that what is the nature of intervention that you would suggest to make elderly digitally enabled in the rural areas?
Uh, uh, Himanshu had asked this question, I guess.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So, okay. Himanshu, just to answer this question, it requires a basic understanding of what a rural economy works on, or a rural setting works on. As for other programs that we have, whether we have programs of rural development, or you see programs of rural employment, etc., etc., all these programs are based on the self-help group approach, SHGs. Now, SHG is what is required even for improving the digital access in rural areas. If we are going to cater to demands individually, that approach works more in urban areas for all kind of welfare activities, for all kind of program application. In rural areas, it is always group based approach which works wonders, for the simple reason that the rural economy does not have that kind of elasticity. When I say elasticity, I mean the fact that to make everybody available, the technology, it has to be provided at the community level, at the group level. And that would increase the digital inclusion in the larger rural areas that we have.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, so the next question is from Nikki. She says that, ma'am, do you think we are ever going to reach a point in time where the population in its entirety is going to be digitally adept? Or is there always going to be a relapse? Because there are always going to be technological updates, and the relevance for adapting to these changes goes on diminishing as an individual ages.
You're very right in stating whatever you are saying, and that brings us to a very relevant discussion about the need for upgradation. But one has to be realistic in an approach. We are talking about a population which is not even fully covered in terms of its accessibility to technology, and then comes the upgradation question. And as far as whether there would come a time or not, as you already have yourself have stated, it's an ongoing process. And the relevance of it gets highlighted by the fact that the proportions of population that we are going to see, that only adds to the relevance of the whole requirement of upgradation. It's an ongoing process, like any other process. For example, a random example of take literacy, for example. Just prefix it with digital. Literacy or literacy enhancement is an ongoing process. It does not happen today, it will not stop tomorrow. It has to be taken care of every day. Similarly, for accessing the technology or increasing the access to technology, and thereby upgrading the knowledge or the digital knowledge, is an ongoing process. It requires everyday effort. Everyday effort.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, so the next question is from Mahima Mahajan. She says that elderly generally have no or very few sources of income, and many of the new and improved technologies aren't affordable. So what are the different ways to fight with this barrier?
Very, very rightly said that elderly have a limited source of income. Firstly, that needs to change. That needs to change for the simple reason that there are people of the age 60 and plus who are actively searching for jobs. One. Secondly, the programs have to be such that they make provisions for elderly employment. Once the provisions for elderly employment are made, then their skill upgradation, then their skill enhancement can be taken care of. But the idea is to first talk about employment of the elderly. That is more crucial for discussion, because once that is brought to the focus in terms of employment generation of the elderly, the skill development is the natural corollary to it. So the discussion has to be on the fact of increasing the employment opportunities that are available to elderly in certain sections of the countries. It is not everywhere in the world that you see that there are no jobs for the elderly. There are countries which have had special provisions. There are countries which have put aside certain kind of community jobs for the elderly only. And obviously understandable that they are smaller countries, But let's assume that every state in our country is a country in itself in terms of the size of the population, and then start making plans for programs for it. State governments can do wonders if they decide on building policies or programs for their elderly. Yeah.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, the next question is from Tanuj Nakra. He says that as every other software company releases their update every now and then, do you think an option for software downgrade of certain platforms is a viable option?
Why should a downgrade be done? Downgrade in the sense of so that it becomes easily accessible for the elderly. I am sorry, but I don't agree to this. By the simple narration of the fact that it is a downgrade, it is extremely it's not a term that I would like to use for anybody who's on the other side of the age bracket. But yes, what is relevant is that this constant upgradation that happens, this constant updates that come, is another small little problem that people with partial usage and relevance of a digital technology has to they struggle with it every now and then, so thereby making it some kind of a static kind of a technology which is relevant for them today, and even with 10 upgrades it still remains viable. That, yes, that should be or that could be an option to be seen. Yeah.
All right, ma'am. Ma'am, so the next question is from Deepti. She says, thank you, ma'am, for such an illuminating session. And then she says that as you very correctly raised a relevant point, that the moment an individual turns 60, we have connotations like there are preparations for end of life. So how should we go about addressing this?
By not thinking like this. That is all I can say, because the barricades, the barriers, ageism actually exists in all our heads. It is not something that is that the government or any external agency has to be blamed for it. This is something that we all are doing it to ourselves and to the others. So by not trying and not to get into that rigmarole of thinking in a stereotypical manner is what is how I guess one can defeat ageism on a very personal level. And once each one of us start to do it, that we are society. A family is the smallest unit. If one family does it one time, that's how 1 + 1 is going to make all the difference, because ageism has nobody else but yourself to be blamed for. To be blamed, you cannot blame anybody else but yourself for being part of that ageism group, and until and unless I change myself, until and unless I will have to stop myself from saying, no, I'm in 5 years I'm going to be 50, फिर क्या करना है? You get into that. Why? Because you are a construction of your own social upbringing. We all are. We cannot escape it. So that is the reason why when you talk of ageism, you do not have to just talk about the people who are not 60 yet, and they are they are typecasting a population. You also have to talk about the people who are 60 plus and they are typecasting themselves. Why? Because the same set of social, we all are products of the same social acclimatization process. We all have passed through the same. So if it has to stop, if it has to change, it has to change with oneself. That is all that I can say, and that includes everybody without any exception. It includes all of us, whether a 10-year-old or a 70-year-old or an 80-year-old or even a person who's going to be 50 in 4 years' time. All of us have to change our thinking about now that we are this age, let's wait for our end. Because it is a culturally driven thought. It is not uniform across the world. It does not, that is not how an understanding is built. It is so culturally driven. It is so part of the socio-cultural understanding that if you want to escape it, you will have to make that choice first and then make efforts accordingly.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, the next question is from Miss Veggie Raghunathan. She says, can you share your thoughts on cyber theft and data protection? Aren't the elderly more vulnerable?
They are not more vulnerable. They are actually, as and when their usage of the internet is going to increase, and it is increasing, and the pandemic hasn't helped. A lot of older people who are very, very new in terms of technology usage, and their usage of technology is user driven, is usefulness driven. There is a relevance of technology for them and they use it for that. And in the absence of the regulatory mechanism or the safety mechanisms in place, they are a vulnerable lot. Also, added to that, this entire idea of making transaction where money is involved, but physical money is not involved, is also if I may say, is also a barrier which a lot of elderly have to overcome. I do not wish to kind of talk in terms of the fact that it is essential. But nonetheless, whether I talk about it or not, it is an essential requirement now. So what we are doing by not providing enough cyber safety to these people, to such transactions, is that we are increasing their vulnerabilities manifold. The non-knowledge or lack of knowledge of a technology or a limited knowledge of a technology is actually a barrier which exists, which increases the fear of technology. And when this fear is founded to be true in terms of the lacking safety mechanism, is where the enhanced vulnerabilities of the elderly comes into. It is like saying that their worst ideas are now found to be true. And as far as I guess it was a report by one of the banks, I'm forgetting the name, but there is some report in the public domain which states very, very clearly the increased number of cases of cyber thefts. Of course, it does not talk so much about where and when the elderly are involved, but the proportion of such transactions that have been sacrificed has increased over a period of time. And since it has increased in proportion, by common logic, it means that more and more elderly and their money is also involved.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, the next question is that since there are different retirement ages for men and women, with men's retirement ages being kept at a higher level vis-a-vis the retirement age for the females. So, ma'am, do you think that there is any logic behind it? And Additionally, should the retirement age should be based on the life expectancy of the people? So higher the life expectancy, so more the retirement age, or these are two independent variables?
Firstly, retirement age, as far as the governmental sector is concerned, is same for men and women. If it is 58 for men, it is 58 for women as well. Secondly, should it be based on the life expectancy? In that case, women would be working for a longer number of years than men. I am not very averse to that idea actually, but just to kind of answer it a little seriously, retirement differential retirement age based on gender cannot be substantiated on a premise that one lives longer, therefore one should be in working capacity of the present occupation for a longer period of time. Because if retirement is conditioned around certain number of years that you have put to the organization, then those should be same for both men and women. But yes, having said that, there are numerous writings which point out that the ageist behavior that women have to go through in comparison to men in certain societies are more. So one can actually discuss on how to reduce the discrimination that people beyond a certain age face, rather than saying that your retirement age should be based on the life expectancy, because you cannot, again I state this, you cannot build your labor policies in a piecemeal manner. We are a country, and like ours, there are other countries as well, whereby on one hand life expectancy is increasing, on the other hand the proportion of younger people are also increasing. So the balance has to be reached between the two, between people who are tending to live longer and the people who are ready for taking the opportunities of employment. So the fine balance has to be reached between the two. It cannot be at the cost of one that one is thinking about the other.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, so we have the last question for the day. It is by Gorangi. She says that my question lies in the fact that should the government particularly play a role or provide incentives or subsidies in any way to the senior citizens in an attempt to ensure that the relationship that exists between the working class and the senior citizens is not merely just that of a provider, especially considering the fact that most post-retirement benefits are negligible, if at all.
So what I can gather from the question is the fact that should there be some special benefits or special provisions for the elderly, so that the relation between the working class population and the retired or the senior member should not only be that of a provider, or being the one who's taking care of the elderly. But then who should be doing it is the question. Government can make special provisions for it, but it is not a very not an idea which cannot be discussed. it is a very realistic idea. What I am more interested in is the fact that rather than talking about special provisions, can we not talk about uh, empowering aging, so that the provisions are such that the the aged who wish to work are able to work, because that will change not only this relationship of a provider and the one who's dependent, but it is going to change the logistics of the income of the household as well. Elderly and elderly income can be an important component of a household income. Again, we are presupposing the fact that the young is going to earn more, and from that more earning, they are going to provide for the elderly. This is nothing but uh, it's an assumption. More empowering would be a situation where the income of the young is is enhanced by the income of the elderly of the house, and both together increase the total income of the household. By doing that, this entire discourse of one being dependent on the other is set to change. One. Secondly, we will then be talking about a more relevant issue than dependence, which is the labor force dependency. Because by empowering, by providing an employment opportunity to the elderly, you are putting the person in the category of a worker. So you are taking him away from that dependent category and adding him into the workers category, and thereby increasing the income of the household, which will be more realistic, more beneficial, and probably has a long-lasting impact on this dependent versus worker, and worker being the provider and has to take care of the dependent kind of a discourse. That is what I feel. Yeah.
Right, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an enlightening session. I, on behalf of the North Cap University, would like to express my sincere gratitude to you, ma'am, for sparing your valuable time and sensitizing all of us on this such a pertinent issue. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Notcap, and thank you, Tavleen. And I must congratulate you for one thing, and a very, very simple thing. You people ask good questions, relevant questions, and many questions, which is for a teacher, it is probably the delight. It is actually the greatest compliment that can be given to a teacher, and the students of the North Cap University needs to be congratulated for that. Thank you very much. I have enjoyed speaking to all.
Likewise, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.